Hey everybody, it's Seth with Jenson USA, and I am joined by Aaron Kerson. And today we're going to be giving you a run through on how to measure and get the correct dropper seat post for your bike. So one of the best upgrades you can do to your bike, whether it's an old bike or a new bike, is to throw a dropper post on that. A lot of new bikes come with a dropper post, so you may just want to add a little bit of extra travel, give you a little bit more versatility out on the trails, and we absolutely think the dropper post is one of the best ways to get more out of your bike. We even think that cyclocross and gravel bikes get more fun when you add a dropper post to them. So with that being said, we have Aaron here to help you learn the numbers and measurements that you need to know in order to make sure you get the correct post for your bike. So Aaron, why don't you walk us through these processes?
Absolutely. So one of the number one questions that we receive at P&W Components is, how do I figure out what travel and which size dropper post works with my bike? So what we've done is we've gotten together, we've basically broken this down into 5 steps. So the first step is figuring out, can I have internal or external routing on my bike? The number 2 is figuring out which diameter your post is for your frame. Number 3 is going to be figuring out what your max extension is based on where you like to ride your saddle when it's fully raised. The 4th measurement is going to be related to that. That's actually going to be from the top of your seat tube down to whatever your post may bottom out on. So that's going to help us figure out, like, sure, you may be able to get the right extension, but can the post actually insert far enough down in there? Bringing this all home, the 5th step is going to be figuring out what the total length is that you need to, or what the appropriate length of the post would be. So us manufacturers, we measure that. Pretty standard is from the top of the post, obviously, to the bottom. One thing to keep in mind here is there is a little bit of variance on whether this actuator for the internal routing is actually being counted in that measurement. So that's one thing to keep in mind, just make sure you're comparing apples to apples. So let's go ahead and jump into a few of these steps. So like I was saying, the number 1 thing is, can I have an internal routing or for that stealth routing, or can I have external? There's a few giveaways here. My Evil happens to be internally routed. If you already have a dropper in the bike, dead giveaway, just copy whatever it has. If you're not sure though, and maybe you have a rigid post, some things to look at are basically on where that cable may go in. So on some hardtails and older full suspensions, you can actually see that there is an internally routed cable port for the top tube. The problem you're going to run into though is once this post is in there, that cable can't actually get to the post. So we need to make sure that your cable is somehow going up, near the bottom bracket or the bottom of the seat tube and up into the post. So look around for, little, maybe a little rubber cover towards, the back side of the seat tube, or maybe near the bottom bracket, something like that. It will be pretty obvious. And that's obviously if you can't find it on your manufacturer's website to begin with. So that's number 1. Number 2 is going to be figuring out what diameter is this. So a great place to start is go on your manufacturer's website. If you're not seeing it there, a lot of companies will just say what the model of seat post is and not the actual diameter. The easiest way is just pull your post out of the frame. Usually it'll be actually marked towards the end of the post. So this one happens to be a 31/6. It's actually marked right there. Most seat posts will have that unless it's been cut or something like that, like if it's a rigid post. So again, manufacturer's website, looking at the post itself. There's also the old school method of measuring across what that actual diameter is of the opening. Really, you're typically going to be either a 30.9 millimeter or a 31/6, but there are some frames that are 27.2 or maybe up to 34.9. So anyway, it usually is something you can figure out, but there are a few options. So 3rd step here is where we actually start to get a little more tech. So what we're going to want to do is pull out your tape measure. So this is really the only tool that you need. And you're going to want to measure from the top of your seat collar here to basically the center of your saddle rails. So the reason that we go with the center of our saddle rails is, if you notice here, this has a pretty aggressive angle, depending on where you're mounting or how you're mounting your saddle. We want to get basically just an average of that. So that's why we're not recommending out here, not recommending out to here. We just kind of want that middle point. So make sure once you've got that dialed in, that's going to let you know what the full extension is. Number 4 is going to be from the same spot here, the top of the seat collar, down to something that the post might bottom out on. So a good way to test this is just loosen up your seat collar and just try to push your existing post in there. As soon as it hits something, you're gonna know to obviously look down there and figure out what it is and measure to that point. So with my frame, I'm bottoming out because my seat tube comes down and then it actually has a bend here. So that's a pretty common situation. Some other less common, but very important ones are still, maybe your frame has 2 water bottle cage bolts. That's something to definitely keep an eye out for because they do go through the frame and your post will bottom out on them. Another would be whether your suspension linkage bolt is going through the frame or something like that. So there's a lot of kind of variations on what that could be. Just make sure you're aware of what they are and measure down to them. To get this last most important step is figuring out, based on the travel, what's the overall length that my frame can actually accommodate. So you're gonna actually add figures number 3 and number 4 to come up with basically like what is the minimum full length that I can mount in my frame and go from there. So all these things come in full circle. There are, I know, some various steps here, but really they're not so difficult, and by breaking it down in this way, it gives you a nice kind of methodical way to figure this out.
You mentioned the actuator down here in the cable. When we look at overall length, we're going to be having our max ride height and our maximum insertion added together. How much of a number do you generally recommend to accommodate for that cable?
That's a great question. So the rule of thumb that we come up with is about 20 millimeters. And the reason for that is, imagine this post is in the frame. Let's say I need to basically get it very close to where my max insertion is. The problem that you may run into is this cable may actually kink. So you want to make sure that the cable has enough breathing room so that it's not kinking and damaging the cable or just not working at all. So that's another one. We've seen it a few times where we're able to measure the correct length, but then we forget about that additional measurement, which is the cable. One thing to keep in mind here, though, is it's not a factor for all frames. It just depends on what it's bottoming out on.
All right, on. And then also on here, we can see that we have a minimum insertion length. What is this number, and why should customers be cognizant of this?
Yeah, so the minimum insertion is basically the minimum line. So looking at this line here, this would mean that you cannot extend the post beyond this, because basically when we're testing these, make sure they're safe and we're passing our engineering standards. This is the minimum insertion that we have tested and verified that this post can handle your body weight up to, for us, it's 250 pounds. Each manufacturer has a little bit of different definition there, but the point being, minimum insertion is very important to keep an eye on, and you do not want to go past that line for safety issues, essentially.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It'll keep your frame happy too.
Yes,
so
definitely.
Yeah. Well,
Cool.
Awesome. I think that definitely helps to guide our customers and to get everyone kind of on the same plane of how to pick this out. If you have any other questions, though, our gear advisors are standing by ready to help you out, and they can walk you through this stuff and make sure that you're getting the right size dropper post for your ride. Remember, all orders over $50 have free shipping, so dropper post definitely falls into that category. And go ahead and hit us up in the comments if you have any questions or thoughts about this subject, or any hints or tricks that maybe you do to get the correct size, and let us know. Hit the subscribe button, check us out on Instagram and Facebook, and remember, keep pedaling.